great show for us, all about the hidden contract and how birth certificates, debt, and toxin controls the system. Of course, a woman, that's our species, yes? Somebody could have a belief that, life is your own, which it's supposed to be, of course, yet the birth certificate, the marriage certificates, and things like that really is supposed to be your work and your property, yet documents say otherwise. Trickery is being used, definite, and forgery and fraud where all of that is. A birth certificate becomes a bond, and a marriage license inserts the state as the primary executor above your mum and your dad. So contracts appear sacred, of course, but the living witness is reduced just to an entry. That's it. Names and numbers and estates administered by the state that never created that life, but claim a management role over it. But your law really begins to resemble just accounting itself, just to rob you, fleece you from all your worth, just the same as a mortgage, meaning a death contract. Which, what the hell is a mortgage? It's a mortgage because you're an infant decedent. Shouldn't people be talking a bit more about this? This is what our podcast is about. So you, the son of a purr or the daughter of a purr, just becomes collateral, you see, within a structure which you or I typically never knowingly agreed to whatsoever. So most of these contracts, they are void. Why? Too many mistakes where that goes on, you see, and not proper transparency at all. They can't survive. So the terrain really widens a bit. I'm not sure what that means. I'm just looking at what I was given here. Let's see. The debt really replaces currency. And it's just a debitor, and everybody is a debitor afterwards. It's like, oh my God. And corporations stand, to win, and where the nations are, it's a corporation, and so surveillance expands, but that's got nothing to do with anything you and I asked for whatsoever. And so most of these things is unpopular. And yet what's unpopular is really what's over the top, and warrants, all of that is blurred, isn't it? And not anything is a proper authorised warrant, which you have a right to ask for, and generally that doesn't exist. So warrants just blur into administrative rubber stamps and policy merging with private finance, you see. And it's on a level of what's biological, where a level of pattern is just repeated. And so is that just like glyphosate? So what would be the reason why someone would say, hey, we're going to allow glyphosate? It's like, who said we're going to allow glyphosate when the vast majority of people just do not want glyphosate? And that somebody will say, oh, if we can't use glyphosate, it's like, what's going to happen? It's like, stop. Find a way to do this, because you can't keep poisoning everybody. So persistent toxin in tissue and banned pesticides just lingering where the food chain is, neurological damage, and all of this is explained, you see, and your legal identity and money mechanics behind the scene. It's an environmental burden, a societal burden, and it just converges into the architecture which really controls an operatedness, and you've got people falling on both sides of the fence where something is. So your and my, where the hero's journey begins, it's really a moment of where you see this contradiction, you see. And if the living witness is treated as property, and the first task is to understand title, because it's your title. what's your title? Is that as a camel driver, as a train driver, as a commercial driver? That's your ID? That is not your ID. Even if you were operating in commerce, that must not be your ID. But if you've got just a drive horse license, and you do not need that to be able to travel where you're not engaged in commerce, you do not have to regurgitate your tool of a tie to your property, because when you regurgitate all your title, it's like, what did you do? You looking at a document doesn't say man or woman. That is your title. So you're going to say that right, which you have, must flow from title, right? And if your title is a drive whore, that's not a title. This is an occupation, which you probably are not using your motorcycle or your bike or your vehicle or anything to drive parcels around per se, or to be taking passengers and what have you, when you've never done that whatsoever. And so, is that because when you pull that out, you have a contract? You're contracted. It's like, you're latched. And no nation is free while you continue to be engaged where you're latched. And why shouldn't there be Article 3 or Article 4 courts, which is a common law court of record? That's what you should have. Why would you want to have anything else? You're like, you better be in your own clothing and not someone else's clothing. And if illness is looked at properly, it's not a mystery, certainly not. And what would be the reason why the vast majority of people are urinating glyphosate? And people, you're going to say that that's fine and that it doesn't engage anything that's toxic? It's the law of the life colloid where things are. Life colloid is a word to replace biology, because bio just means Greek for life, which we have the word life. So what do you want to use bio for? Why don't you use life? And it's a colloid, life colloid. That's the organism that we have within ourselves. And so the law of the life colloid and currency are certainly not separate systems. They mirror each other. And so the path more forward, where clarity is really knowing where authority really is, and you, the living being, and how do you have standing where things are? You see, you should look into these things for sure. So the framework which we've got coming up, it raises a few questions, and it's a good full podcast that really walks you through some of this. Anyway, listen into the full episode and see how all these pieces connect, and comment witness below if you really want a deeper reference to the documentation and continue discussion, after hearing this full podcast. Love you guys. Catch up to you in the podcast.